Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. This is a briefing by the Brooklyn Speaks Coalition on the 20th anniversary of the Atlantic Yards project. Thank you all for taking the time to join us this morning. I'm going to take a second. I'm Gib Vacconi of the Prospect Heights Neighborhood Development Council, and I'd like to introduce the other coalition members who are here today. Michelle, would you like to lead us off?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. Michelle Delaus, Executive Director of the Fifth Avenue Committee, and I will pass it to Regina.
Hi, Regina Cahill, North Flatbush Avenue Business Improvement District, also 300 steps from the Barclay Arena, and have lived here for 48 years. So good morning.
And we're also joined by Assemblymember Joanne Simon.
Hi, I'm Assemblymember Joanne Simon. Site 5 is part of the site is in my district, and I first started with Brooklyn Speaks when I was the Boerum Hill Association representative in organizing Brooklyn Speaks in 2006.
So we'll begin with our presentation now. We're going to talk a little bit about how the project began and where it's been, and then we'll take some questions at the end. And hopefully you can all see my screen now. So as we mentioned before, this presentation is being made by the Brooklyn Speaks Coalition. We formed in 2006 to increase public engagement and improve accountability at Atlantic Yards. And our coalition members are the Atlantic Avenue LDC, the Boerum Hill Association, the Brooklyn Heights Association, Brown Community Development Corporation, the Center for New Urbanism in New York City, Diaspora Community Services, the Fifth Avenue Committee, the Park Slope Civic Council, Impact Brooklyn, the North Flatbush Business Improvement District, and the Prospect Heights Neighborhood Development Council. So together we're civic organizations, merchant organizations, and community-based affordable housing organizations active in this part of Brooklyn. Yesterday was the 20th anniversary of the Atlantic Yards project, which was announced on December 10th, 2003. The project originally was intended to bring an arena, open space, commercial, and residential development to Brooklyn, including 2,250 affordable apartments. And you see this map of the original project proposal from its environmental impact statement. Empire State's Development's finding of blight due to the exposed Vanderbilt Yards was used as justification to approve the project under the state UDC law. Approval under UDC allowed Atlantic Yards to override city zoning, bypass local review, and use the power of eminent domain to assemble land. So this was a very key part of such a large project being able to move forward in this part of Brooklyn. Since then, the arena and 8 residential buildings were constructed, but after 20 years, the rail yards are still undeveloped, and most of the project's open space is incomplete, and 877 affordable apartments have yet to be built. And I just want to pause for a second, and for those of you who may not be familiar with the project footprint, you see here the Barclays Center Arena at the corner of Flatbush Avenue and Atlantic Avenue. This section of the project here on the right is known as Site 5. It's a block that's now occupied by a former Modell's location and a P.C. Richard. And then this area obviously is what's known as the Vanderbilt Yard. These are the rail yards that were proposed to be covered and then have 6 apartment buildings constructed above them. So the question is, why has this not happened yet after 20 years of Atlantic Yards? Well, unlike some of its other large projects, ESD didn't form a local development corporation that would oversee the project and engage developers through an RFP process and then manage the build out. Instead, it awarded the entire project to sole developer Forest City Ratner companies without a competitive bid. This was especially an issue because the economic feasibility of dense residential construction over a rail yard platform had never been proven outside of Manhattan, where real estate values are much higher than they are in Brooklyn. ESD never independently assessed where this kind of a project would be viable in Brooklyn. It simply relied on Forest City's representations that it had the capacity to complete the work. ESD then allowed Forest City to defer development over the rail yards until the last phase of the project. So in 2014, when the arena was completed and one building was under construction, ESD allowed Forest City to sell a 70% interest in the remainder of the project to Greenland USA, which is a developer controlled by the government of Shanghai. At the time, Forest City was under financial pressure and wasn't able to move forward independently without another development partner. In 2014, Greenland Forest City Partners borrowed $349 million using EB-5 financing. EB-5 is a program that allows foreign nationals to loan money at low interest rates to development projects in the United States that create jobs. And in exchange for that, the lenders get access to green cards so they can relocate to the United States. ESD allowed Greenland Forest City Partners to transfer the rights to develop over the rail yard into an LLC that would secure that loan. Now, we should point out that just a few years prior to that, in 2009, Forest City had paid $100 million to the MTA for those same rights. And effectively, this transaction valued the rights at $349 million. Again, this was never independently established as the true value of those rights. In 2018, Greenland acquired an additional 20% interest in the Atlantic Yards project, bringing its total share to 95%. Later that year, Forest City Radnor was acquired by Brookfield Asset Management. So at this point, Forest City has ceased to exist as an independent company, and the developer that got the single source contract for Atlantic Yards in 2006 has now disappeared. Finally, in November of this year, the EB-5 lenders moved to foreclose after Greenland defaulted on its loan, bringing the development rights over the Vanderbilt Yard under the control of the lenders underwritten by the U.S. Immigration Fund. So development rights on the rail yards are now scheduled to be auctioned off on January 11th. Among the EB-5 investors is a private equity firm known as Fortress Investment Group that has a history of being involved in restructuring types of transactions. So it's virtually certain that future development of the unbuilt areas of the Atlantic Yards project will be done by multiple parties. At this point, we have the following questions for Empire State Development. If the blight conditions at the site were so severe in 2003, why did ESD allow scheduling of the rail yard platform for the last phase of the project? Why has ESD never independently assessed the feasibility of development over the rail yard? How did ESD confirm the value of development rights over the rail yards would be enough to secure Greenland Forest City Partners' $349 million EB-5 loan? Given its loan default, does Greenland USA still have rights under the project agreements to develop Site 5? And then finally, who is now responsible for the obligation to complete the remaining 877 affordable apartments by May 2025 or pay the liquidated damages of $1.8 million per month? Now I'd like to hand off to Michelle of the Fifth Avenue Committee.
So, one of the, main benefits that this project was supposed to deliver was the 2,250 units of affordable housing. And when you look at the gentrification and displacement pressures, in particular in the 4 community boards around the project that were supposed to benefit from an affordable housing lottery preference, you see that there's been significant displacement, in particular of African-American residents. Brooklyn Speaks actually did an analysis in 2014 that looked back at census tract information and then projected what the change in racial demographics would be in those 4 community boards to really demonstrate to the state of New York that at that moment in time in 2014, the proposed delay of 10 years for the provision of the full 2,250 units of affordable housing, that really the demographics would change dramatically. And so you see here that in 1990, the African-American population in the 4 community boards was 59%. And then it was projected to be 15% in 2035. I'll just say that, you know, we worked with Professor Lance Freeman, then of Columbia University, to do this analysis. And if you look at the most recent census data, it bears out the projections extremely closely. So moving on to the next slide, you know, one of the things that's always been problematic about the project is that it's never been affordable enough to really impact displacement pressures and provide truly affordable housing for folks that need it. So of the 1,373 affordable housing units that have been completed, the folks that live in those units earn significantly more than what was originally promised in a MOU between then Acorn and Forest City Radnor. So you can see here the AMI levels. The original project had a much higher percentage of deeply affordable units. You know, it also had quite a few units that were really focused on middle income, but the project to date has really delivered most affordable housing to middle income families rather than low and moderate income families. So, you know, as we look to what the next phase of this project will bring, it's really important that any plan to build over the rail yards include truly affordable housing so that local residents in Brooklyn who want to live here and who are at risk of displacement and who are often paying over 30% of their income in rent can actually benefit from the project, and to ensure that the project's accountable to the public.
So our view is that the failure of the project to deliver on its primary objective to deck the rail yards, join together the neighborhoods of Fort Greene and Prospect Heights, and provide affordable housing to people in danger of displacement in Brooklyn is a direct result of ESD having given the entire project to a single source developer, never determining the financial viability, and then making concessions along the way that gave the developer reason to take more risks and extend the obligations of the project further out into the future. ESD has never had more than 2 full-time employees assigned to Atlantic Yards, which is a $6 billion project. It doesn't have, at this point, any framework or resources to create a new project plan independently and execute it in a context where it has to manage multiple developers. So it's very clear to us more than ever that in order for the project to actually deliver on its promises to the people of Brooklyn and New York State, it needs a new management structure. What we're proposing is the type of structure that is common in other large ESD projects, a local development corporation or a subsidiary that has a board that represents all stakeholders in the project, the state, the city, and local stakeholders that are in a position to really assess and hold the project accountable. As an example, the board of such an organization could have 2 appointees appointed by the governor, including its chair, Those appointees would be responsible for representing the interests of Empire State Development, the MTA, and the Long Island Railroad. The mayor of the city of New York might have 3 appointees who are responsible for representing the interests of city agencies, including the NYPD, HPD, and the Department of Transportation. State and federal legislators would have 4 appointees who are responsible for ensuring the continued funding of the LDC and also overseeing sustainability targets for the project as a whole. And then locally, the city council and the borough president would have 2 appointees who would be able to ensure that planning for the project still meets the needs of the people of Brooklyn and the quality of life concerns are addressed. This, we believe, is the most important thing for ESD to be focused on now so the project can move forward in a transparent and accountable way. So with that, we will turn it over to those of you joining us today for question and answer. If you could please use the Zoom raised hands feature, we are happy to recognize you for questions. You know, I'm sorry, I just said that, but I realized that we have some folks here I'd like to call on for additional comments. Again, let me turn it over to Assemblymember Joanne Simon.
Thanks, Gib. I appreciate it. And thank you for that great presentation, you and Michelle. I think it's clear that a couple of things shine through here. Number one, that Atlantic Yards, instead of providing additional housing and bringing people together, has actually furthered displacement in this area in a fairly dramatic way if you look at that number since 2000. And it's also very clear that we need accountability and we need more affordability at this project. We need that open space that was so much promised, much a part of that Garden of Eden approach, to be built, and to be built in a way that is more inviting to community in terms of its actual use. We're very concerned that if there is an increase at all in the density of the project, however this may be negotiated out at some point, that we would lose more open space. And with greater density, we would need even more open space and more usable open space by the folks who would be able to use that. And so it's very clear we need a new plan that works for Brooklyn. The platform is uneconomical in Brooklyn, so we need a new plan, and we need that plan to have a representation such as the governance structure that was proposed, because we need the voices of those people who are accountable to the people of Brooklyn to be at that table, making those decisions and representing the people of Brooklyn. And as a state legislator, I stand ready to work with Brooklyn Speaks and with ESD to create such an entity and ensure that the voices of Brooklyn and the needs and economic needs and the housing needs of Brooklynites are achieved at Atlantic Yards. So thank you.
Thank you, Assemblymember Simon. And we're also joined by Assemblymember Robert Carroll, who I'd also like to offer the floor for comments.
Good morning. Thank you, Gib, and thank you everyone who's here. Let me echo what my colleague, Assemblymember Simon, just said. We need to make sure that the residents of Prospect Heights and downtown Brooklyn and the North Slope have their voice and their say in this matter. This plan was devised 20 years ago. It's now partially built, and there is no plan to finish this mega project. And so that means we need to go back to the drawing board. We need to have clarity and finality brought to this project through EDC, through the legislature, and through input by community members. And I think we can all agree that, putting at the forefront affordable housing, open space are essential and are needed by the Brooklyn communities that are most impacted by this project. And so I look forward to working with everyone on this call and working with my colleagues in government to ensure that there is a new path forward The old plan that was devised 20 years ago clearly has not worked. We need to come up with a new plan so that we can finish this once and for all, and we can meet the needs of the community. And those needs are affordable housing and open space, among many others. And so I'm really glad that Gib and Michelle and Brooklyn Speaks and others have been able to bring us together to talk about this very, very important crossroads that we're at right now.
Thank you, Assemblymember Carroll. And now we will open the floor to questions from press. And please raise your hands, and we'll call on you. While we're still looking for questions from press, I'll also offer an opportunity to staff here representing other elected officials who would like to offer any statement at this point. And again, if you'd like to raise your hands, that's fine.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Thanks. I just want to give a brief statement on behalf of Councilmember Crystal Hudson. You know, our office, in coordination with Gib, Michelle, and many others, embarked, and especially Brooklyn Community Board 8, embarked on the Atlantic Avenue mixed-use plan specifically to understand what this community wants. I mean, CB8 told us so many times, and we heard from them, that folks wanted deeply affordable housing and jobs in the area for folks so that folks can live and work there. And the Atlantic Yards project, what we are seeing right now is this lack of accountability is sacrificing the most important thing for residents in this district. We know that deeply affordable housing is scarce, and we know that this needs to be the city and the state's priority. So we look forward to working with our colleagues in the state legislature to establish these accountability measures, to hold hearings, to do whatever is necessary to ensure that we finally get the housing that our neighbors so deeply, deeply deserve. Thanks.
Thank you, Andrew. So at this point, as I don't see any other raised hands, I'll also ask my Brooklyn Speaks colleagues and Assembly members Simon and Carroll if they would like to make any other comments before we close the meeting.
The only thing I would say, especially, this project took advantage of, overrode local zoning, right? Took advantage of tax breaks from the federal government, obviously took advantage of the EB-5 program from the federal government, and benefited directly from taxpayer subsidy from the city and the state. And so, like, literally every level of government has contributed in some way to the project, even though it's the Empire State Development Corporation that's overseeing it. So as we think about what accountability looks like, I think every level of government can think of, how it can bring accountability to the project.
I want to also say that, as Michelle alluded to, every level of government has been involved in furthering this plan, which was always way too highly leveraged and not particularly good when it came to urban design and urban planning. But the reality is that nobody has ever voted on this. Nobody in the city council, nobody in Congress, nobody in the state legislature ever voted to do this. And so that's one mechanism that we need to bring to the table, is to have an effort where, there is real participation and accountability of legislators, number one. And the other thing that I think is a very burning issue that has changed dramatically since that time, and that is the issue of climate and sustainability. This project was conceived during a time long before the Climate Action Plan was released, long before we passed the Community Leadership and Community Protection Act. And the reality is that it is not a sustainable project. There's too much hardscape, which will flow into the Gowanus, part of the Gowanus watershed. And we need to really look at what we do and its impacts on adjacent areas when it comes to sustainability. And so the issue about climate is also very important to have our fingers on the pulse when it comes to planning for the future, because at some point something will happen at the site. We don't want to wait 12 years for the contract to run out if the bondholders decide to do nothing, which is a possibility. But we also don't know whether this will sell, under what terms it will sell. And that is something that we feel cannot be, is not a sustainable model. We can't wait 12 years and end up with a hole in the ground and no approach to going forward. That's just not feasible from a housing point of view, from an economic point of view, and it certainly isn't from a climate point of view.
And I would also just like to add that there's been never any ongoing discussion about effects on the community in terms of public safety and transportation and economic development in terms of how it affects local retail businesses. So those kinds of promises have not been met either. And that's a huge piece of what needs to be incorporated into this project at the moment. Thank you.
So I think we'll just close now by again stating that 20 years out, the original plan for Atlantic Yards has now failed. A new plan is not an option. As others have mentioned, the breakup of the site in the wake of Greenland's default requires a new plan at this point, and it's critical that that plan be created in a transparent, accountable way, not once again among a bunch of private parties as what happened 20 years ago, but involving all local elected officials and community stakeholders to make sure this plan really works for Brooklyn. And that's what we hope to see from the governor and our city government in the weeks ahead. So thank you all very much for your time this morning. And we look forward to continuing to keep you informed as events progress with the new plan for Atlantic Yards.
Gabe, I think we're putting the presentation up on the website, right? So I know some people may want to reference it.
Yes, we're recording this presentation, and it will be posted to our YouTube channel and to the website.
Great. Thanks for being here. Feel free to follow up with questions.
Thank you all.
Thank you all very much.
Bye-bye.
Have a good rest of the day.